Hey everybody, I'm Ryan Doyle. This is the Verdigris Table, and in this one we're going over 10 core rules in Dungeons & Dragons that are going to come up often for you. These are the ones I see players getting confused about and asking questions about a lot. And I'm going to index this video so it'll be easy to come back and reference. You'll see the time bar broken up into labeled chapters and timestamps in the description down below as well. And while we're talking about clicking things on here, hitting like and subscribe is a great way to support me for free. If you want to support me even more, help keep the lights on in here, the link to my Patreon is down in the description as well. All right, let's dive in. 10 common D&D rules I see people mess up all the time. I find myself stopping to explain these often, and I've gotten some of these wrong myself. Nobody's perfect, so if I miss like a big one you think should have been included, or heavens forbid, I get something wrong in here, just let us know in the comments. Just follow the unwritten rule of D&D, end of life, and don't be a jerk. Okay, here we go. In D&D, we always round down. When you put a little rhythm into something, it can be easier to remember, and rhyming helps too, even slant rhymes, round down. It's true for children, and it still works for adults. When it comes up at one of my tables, often now, someone's going to recite, "You always round down."
Here's the thing about D&D. Yin's always got to round down. Round down, Yin's guys. Yin's guys, don't forget to round down. That's what we do in D&D. We round down, especially downtown in Pittsburgh.
You know what? I'm just calling that a bonus because I think we're going over 10 today. Easy. So let's say that this one is number 1. A natural 20 is a critical success on an attack roll. It always hits, and for damage you get twice the dice. Mnemonic rhyming. You don't double the modifier. Rules is written, that's it. Attacks are the only things that crit, not saves and not skill checks. If something is a DC 20 and you've got a negative modifier, you just can't successfully do it, even with advantage. And DC 20 is hard. Now let's say something is very hard, like persuading the queen to abdicate her throne for you. That's DC 25, and honestly it feels like it should be a 30. Should a natural 20 on persuasion automatically do it? Should any commoner who walks in the door with 10s across the board have a 5% chance of succeeding? Can you run it that way? Sure, it's your table, but that is homebrew, and it doesn't always make sense to me. You can still make a nat 20 on a skill check, feel awesome when it succeeds, without giving everyone a chance to do anything. And while we're on DCs, here's another little bonus rhyme to help people remember. Meets it, beats it. I stole that from Bria Iyengar, though I don't know if she made it up or stole it herself from somebody else. When a roll is the same as the target number, it works. The person attempting the thing wins. I see this come up especially when an enemy attack matches a player's armor class. Equals or exceeds, succeeds. Meets it, beats it. All right, this is number 2, and it's a big one. If it is dark and you have dark vision, you make perception checks with disadvantage. If you don't have dark vision and it's dark, they automatically fail, at least if we are relying on vision. I'm all for including all of the senses in a description, but if we're honest with each other, we're usually talking about sight. It smells dangerous in here. You can hear enemies rapidly approaching you. You taste blood as an unseen foe hits you in the face. By the way, whether it's because you are blinded, they're hidden, or magically invisible, an unseen attacker has advantage on attack rolls, and you have disadvantage against them, assuming you're even aiming at the right square. Dark vision allows you to see in dim light normally, while those without it would be at disadvantage. And it lets you see with disadvantage in darkness when those without dark vision are functionally blind. Dark vision is still good, but at least rules as written, it doesn't let you hand wave the question of bringing light to the darkest depths of the dungeon, which has been a logistical and thematic component of the game for 50 years now. The rule for carrying capacity, I think, exemplifies some of the strongest design philosophy of this edition of Dungeons & Dragons. As written, a small or medium creature can carry up to their strength score times 15 pounds. But right after that, in the 2014 PHB, and now in the 2024 PHB, actually appearing first, it spells out that you usually don't have to worry about carrying capacity at all unless you start pushing things into unreasonable territory. As long as we share an assumption about a particular outcome, we can just agree and keep it moving. It's not until a question is raised that we've got to bring the rules and math into it. You want to take all of the gear off of every goblin in the Citadel to haul back to town to sell for gold? Okay, cool, that's getting a little crazy. I think it's time to crunch some numbers. Okay, so scimitars 3 pounds, short bow 2 pounds, leather armor 10 pounds, shield 6 pounds, so that's 21 pounds apiece. Your strength is 9. Okay, so you can carry about 6 goblins worth of stuff if you dump literally all of the rest of your gear. What's that? You're just going to take the 30 scimitars? Great. You can drop 1 weapon for free each turn and another as an action, so it's going to take you 15 rounds of combat to be ready to fight. Actually, no, you're right. 14 rounds if you're going to wield 2 of those scimitars. Look, nobody wants to use encumbrance, so don't make us, okay? Get a wagon or something. This one might get some heat, so I'm just going to straight up read directly from the official rules for Dungeons & Dragons. You can find this one on page 22. Know your spells! Exclamation point. Have your player's handbook open to the description of a spell before you cast it. Don't expect the DM to know how your spell works, and be ready to answer any questions about it. Now, can a dungeon master help a caster out? Of course, but who is responsible for knowing how the wizard's spell works? The person playing the wizard. The dungeon master has the most on their plate already. And we've got a dungeon master crisis going on, people, in case you haven't heard. Imagine you've got a group of newcomers approaching the game, and the system's just changed, so in a sense, everyone is starting out new these days. Is it one person's job to learn everything and then explain it all to the rest of the group during play? Or is it more fair to expect everyone to learn their character's stuff, and whoever has the most interest or bandwidth can do the extra work of learning how to run all the NPCs and the monsters and the scenarios and adjudicate the rules? If you think it's the DM's job to know everything, then okay, I respect that as long as you are the dungeon master. Just know expecting the DM to know everything is not in the book. That's homebrew, but I'm sure you knew that. Here's a quick one for all the groups that played a stretch in Pathfinder or, are mathematically minded. Moving diagonally on a grid still just counts as 5 feet of movement. We do not do trig in D&D, including when elevation change or flying characters bring in the Z-axis. Also, you can't move diagonally through something. To move from here to here would take 10 feet of movement. You can't cut the corner. Bonus reminder, while we're talking movement, you can break it up during your turn in combat. So you have 30 feet of movement. You can move 10 feet, take an action, move another 10 feet, use a bonus action, and then move your final 10 feet. There's usually not a lot of movement once characters are in melee, but if you're in the back line, you might be handing off items, healing, or buffing allies, trying to get line of sight and or take cover. There's a lot you can do. People tend to forget about cover in D&D. If you can only see half of me because something's in between us, then I've got a +2 to AC and dex saves. That something can be a creature, including an ally. So if you're shooting an arrow at the guy I'm fighting and you're behind me, it's a little harder to hit them because you don't want to hit me. And even if it's an enemy between you and your target, it still makes it harder to hit. Makes sense, right? This effect doesn't stack, though. Almost nothing stacks in D&D. And that sometimes makes less sense, but them's the rules. Think about them enough, but not too much. I guess eventually, if there's enough people between a creature and its target, we could call it 3/4 cover, which is a +5 bump to AC and dex saves. Also, note, under normal circumstances, 3/4 cover is the bare minimum to attempt to hide. Sometimes in the heat of a complicated combat, I'll forget about that +2 from being behind a creature. I'll also forget about the fact that making a ranged attack while an enemy is within 5 feet of you is done at disadvantage. Well, I didn't forget about it so much as we had a long discussion about it one night at one of my tables, and we talked about how John Wick shot an arrow into somebody point blank, and it seemed to be pretty easy and very effective. But with the new PHB out, I'm sticking as closely to the rules as written as I can for a while. And besides, upon further review, I say John Wick definitely has the sharpshooter feat. and Spell Sniper is a thing too, so I'll probably stick with this one as written going forward. Here's something I almost never see a character do in combat: dodge. It gives any and every attack made against you disadvantage while you wait and see how a situation plays out for a round. You can still make your full movement and do it, maybe even use a bonus action as well if you got one. It's a nice default option when you're not sure what you should do. Is it the absolute optimal thing to produce the most damage in any given situation? No, probably not, but it sure keeps things moving, and it gives you time to figure out what to do when initiative circles back to you. I've seen groups regularly adding 20-30 minutes to combat because they're trying really hard to not waste 6 seconds of imaginary in-game time. I'd much rather do 5 rounds in 15 minutes than 3 rounds in 45. Wouldn't you? Study and maybe search are also good fallbacks that I predict are going to go underutilized. Here's another combat action worth remembering. It seems like after the first couple levels, players kind of forget that stabilize is an option. If somebody is bleeding out, all it takes is a DC 10 medicine check to stop them from dying. You don't even have to be proficient. And if you've got a healer's kit, you don't even have to roll dice. It auto-succeeds. It costs 5 gold and it has 10 uses. Healing spells and potions bring them back into the action, while stabilize leaves them unconscious, so players prefer not to do it. But when all else fails, it's always there. And you can try to stabilize anybody. Oops, that was supposed to be non-lethal damage? Stabilize. Or on the DM side, oops, wasn't thinking that encounter was TPK territory. Fade to black, stabilize, wake up 1d4 hours later, held for ransom, imprisoned. Hey, here's something else you can do in combat. Talk. Just because initiative has been rolled doesn't mean roleplay has ended. We've talked about how it's everyone's job to use their imagination and contribute to the narrative. In the examples of play that I hope you didn't skip over, the players are describing what their characters are doing in the very first chapter of the book. Now, rules is written, you can communicate through brief utterances and gestures for free on your turn. You got 6 seconds and you're busy, so we don't exactly have time for like grand soliloquies. And it makes sense, but personally, I usually stretch this rule out quite a bit. The more banter and one-liners, witty repartee, even like color commentary going on, the better, as far as I'm concerned. Also, when I'm in a big battle with folks who are still learning the game, or honestly, like strategic wargamer types, I'll often allow a lot of table talk. And that's just preference, style choice, and there are plenty of people that do not like it that way. And in a sense, those people are more correct, though maybe less fun. So play the game the way you enjoy, and you will find your tribe. I will start to tighten up, though, in dramatic moments. When things are getting so metagamey or not really being true to character anymore, or especially if a player, let's say, has adopted a leadership role and is giving unsought advice about what other players should do with their characters on their turn. It's a fine line between being helpful and being bossy. I know I have overstepped and crossed that line a bunch, especially when I started out. And I'll still find myself on the wrong side of that divide occasionally, even in day-to-day life. So if you or someone you love, or some rando who's joined your game, is doing a little too much communicating, you can point to page 24 and politely ask them if they want to spend their action to do all that talking. Opportunity attacks can cause a lot of confusion. And I'm not talking about the fact that earlier editions called it an attack of opportunity. It's the same thing. Don't be pedantic. We also say healing potion half the time, and nobody gets hurt. I mean, opportunity attacks are a little complicated because they interact with a lot of other rules in ways that can be unintuitive. Here's the baseline rule. You can make an opportunity attack when a creature that you see leaves your reach using its action, its bonus action, its reaction, or one of its speeds. To make the opportunity attack, take a reaction to make one melee attack with a weapon or an unarmed strike against the provoking creature. The attack occurs right before the creature leaves your reach. So if somebody leaves melee range, even if they just entered it, just passing through, it opens them up to an opportunity attack. Now, some people won't like that right away. I can't still defend myself while I'm moving. You can, It's called disengage, but you can't take another action while you're doing that, unless, of course, you're special. If a creature leaves melee reach without an action, bonus action, reaction, or one of its speeds, it does not provoke attacks of opportunity. In other words, if you are set in motion because somebody shoves you, a gust of wind pushes you, or you are falling, no opportunity attack. Also, any spell that teleports you, like Misty Step, for example, does not trigger opportunity attacks. The spell description doesn't say so. You have to look up teleportation, so it's easy to miss that one. You might hear people say forced movement does not provoke opportunity attacks, because that was true in an older edition and is almost true now, but it can get you into trouble. If I force you to move by, say, casting fear on you, so you will dash away frightened, that does leave you open for opportunity attacks because you are using your move speed and or your action to move. Would combat be more interesting and dynamic without opportunity attacks? Maybe. Probably. And you don't need anyone's approval to house rule them away, except the other people at your table. But I always recommend you have a very good understanding of a rule and all of the ways it interacts with other aspects of the game before you go changing things. Okay, we definitely crammed way more than 10 in here if you were counting, but for the last stop on our tour, a simple rule worth remembering that you will undoubtedly be reminding someone else one day soon. One spell with a spell slot per turn. This rule is so simple and elegant, a lot of us have been using it for years already, even though it was technically wrong before. But now, it's official. Don't worry about it. If you can cast a spell without using a spell slot, because it's from a class or a species ability, because it's from a magic item, or it's a cantrip, which don't use spell slots, then if you still have the time available on your turn to cast another spell that does use a spell slot, you're good. Otherwise, no good. Keep in mind, this is per turn, not per round. So you can still use a reaction to cast Shield, even if you used a spell slot on your turn, because the reaction is happening on somebody else's turn. D&D can feel pretty complicated, especially when you're first starting out, because it is. So to make things easier, I've cooked up some simple, quick reference cheat sheets to make playing and explaining this game way easier. I got a link down below where you can pick these up on the Dungeon Masters Guild for free. Technically, it's pay what you want, so you can show appreciation and help support the channel if you want to on there. You could also pick up one of my best-selling adventures or regional encounter tables on there while you're at it. I've got videos for all my DM's Guild content. Otherwise, maybe check out this one where we go over some fundamentals in the PHB that new and experienced players will always benefit from coming back to every now and again. Hope I see you there. Until then, be kind, have fun.